Madeira is a small but mighty island packed with so many natural wonders and a warm and friendly culture. It's a nature lover's paradise that you're sure to fall in love with. This is how we spent 2 weeks in Madeira in early spring, taking our time and hiking mostly. Situated in the North Atlantic Ocean off the coast of West Africa lies the small volcanic archipelago of Madeira. This video is longer than we normally do, so we've included timestamps in the description so you can jump to different sections. I'll also apologize in advance for any mispronunciations, as Portuguese was difficult for me to grasp. Even Duolingo couldn't help me. The main island of Madeira is 55 kilometers long and 22 kilometers wide, and is as hilly as they come. The island is large enough, and as you can see, the places we wanted to visit are spread all around, so we decided to split our time and stay 1 week in Calheta in the west, and the second week in Funchal in the east to minimize driving time. The airport is situated in the east end in Santa Cruz and is in itself a marvel of engineering. The airport was built in 1964 with just one runway, and today, while that hasn't changed, it was extended twice to accommodate large jumbo jets. The last runway extension was built over the ocean using massive pillars, as flat land is virtually non-existent here. Pilots require special training to land in Madeira, as the North Atlantic winds are legendary. Madeira now sees about 2 million visitors annually by cruise ship and air. Interestingly, domestic travel from Portugal makes up the largest portion of visitors, followed by the UK and Germany. Of course, I'm sure the famous son of Madeira, Cristiano Ronaldo, probably had something to do with its popularity as well. With tourism accounting for almost a third of the economy, it's not surprising that the island is very tourist-oriented. You'll see more clever engineering as the Madeirans built their roadways by boring through the volcanic rock. You'll drive through tunnel after tunnel, some are short, some even have beautiful waterfalls flowing beside it, and others are over 3 kilometers long. Then there's the roads. They are literally carved into the hillside and are as windy as a switchback. Not to waste any precious space, you'll find farmers growing fields of bananas and grapes on the terraced hillsides between the roads. The towns are as charming as they come, with the classic red clay tile roofs. We based ourselves in the hills above Calheta in the west side for our first week. There was a delicious pizza restaurant and a small grocery store within walking distance. In Calheta itself, the town is centered around a man-made twin beach built with sand imported from Africa. This upscale part of town has a high-end hotel, a large marina, and many seafood restaurants that were surprisingly very reasonably priced. In spring it's fairly quiet, but I can imagine in summertime it's quite different. You can find free parking further out, but in the heart of town it's metered. Not far from our apartment, we headed north and the fog was fairly thick. Our first stop was the Fanal Forest. I'd recommend coming early morning or late afternoon to experience the fog. You're almost guaranteed to see it shrouded in mist, and the laurel trees with their gnarly branches are one of the few remaining laurel forests in the world. There's not really a path here, people just wander around, as did the cows. We loved town hopping after a hike and stopped in many of the small towns and villages we came across. Porto Moniz is one of the larger ones and can get busy with tour buses, but if you're driving, there's a spacious car park near the heart of town. Porto Moniz is known for its natural ocean pools, and you can walk the boardwalk for amazing views. In early spring, it was a bit chilly for us to dip in the pools, but there were some souls braver than us to enjoy it. There are lots of cafes around, and we ate at Conchinha because of the Google reviews we read. Service is friendly and prices are inexpensive. A specialty on the island are the bolo sandwiches, or bolo de caco. Usually it's loaded with garlic butter in it. Continuing on the north coast, you'll come across the town of Ribeira da Janela, where the famous sea stacks are just offshore. It's a very small town. Parking is tight as expected. When we were here, the parking down in the campgrounds were closed off. To experience this best, I'd recommend walking up the stairs through the cliffs for a grand reveal of the stacks. Just off the campground to the left of the stacks, there's a little-known hike that takes you to a viewpoint looking down at the rock formations. It's about 1 kilometer uphill, but it's got a gentle switchback and it's not difficult to hike the elevation. You crisscross farms to get to the top, and we had it to ourselves. You can also drive up the hill, but it's a lot of fun doing the short 2-kilometer round-trip hike. There's a picnic table there so you can enjoy the view and have a snack. Also at Ribeira da Janela, you'll see a large facility, and you might wonder what it is, as we did. It's a hydroelectric power plant that collects water and harnesses energy from the hillside irrigation channels called Levadas. You'll find reservoirs used for hydroelectric plants and wind farms across the top of the island. They connect the simple but ingenious Levada network. These Levadas were built by hand dating back to the 15th century. It's hard to imagine how they were built manually. There are 2,000 kilometers of levadas that channel the water through the mountains. Today, they're also serving a dual purpose, and many are used as trails for some adventurous hikes. Continuing further east from Ribeira da Janela is another seaside town called Seixal, with a black sand beach and a natural pool. There's one road down to the town and it ends at the pier. It's a popular spot for some light surfing, as the bay is somewhat protected and the sand is fine. You'll find a waterfront cafe, and it's great for a little break. You still have to pay to use the restrooms though. We had our island favorite here, a bolo de caco burger and a coffee, of course. Just further down the coast and on the outskirts of Seixal, there's another small natural swimming pool and a steep paved walk to get down there. Waves were rough as expected in the spring, so the pool was closed like the others, but they are amazing just to watch from the cliffside. Definitely one of the most popular hikes is the PR6 Levada das 25 Fontes. Of all the hikes, this is the one you want to get here early for. Partly for parking, but the walkways are narrow and can get backlogged easily. You'll see what I mean in a sec. It's also such a peaceful hike without the crowd.
It's 7:30 in the morning and we're the first ones in the parking lot because Dave was so anxious to get here so early. I'm still half asleep, but It's about a 5 kilometer little hike, not too bad. It's just paved road all the way down as so far, but it's so windy. My hat blew off.
I came early because it's the most popular hike here.
That's right, it's the most popular hike.
Total elevation gain of this hike was 731 kilometers from my all trails, but it didn't feel that steep. Maybe because it was so interesting to hike. We had the falls all to ourselves. The reward for that hiking is a lovely cafe about halfway back. If you buy a treat, you can use their restrooms for free, and there's a paid facility outside if you don't. Taking the road as far west, you'll come across the Ponta de Pargo lighthouse situated off a dramatic cliff. Sunset is the name of the game here, but you won't be able to visit the facilities as it's closed at that time. In the town just before the lighthouse, we discovered yet another local cafe and the name drew us in. It was busy, but the service was very friendly. Dave, being a coffee aficionado, was surprised to see that he could choose between a V60 or a Chemex pour-over. He really enjoyed it, chatting with the barista. I can vouch for the bolo de caco and the homemade fries. They were delicious. We headed back in the area another day to the lookout just south of the lighthouse. It's quieter and there's a cute tea house where you can use the restrooms if you buy something. You can see the lighthouse in the distance from the cliffs and it's a nice perspective. In the tiny town just north of Ponta do Sol, you'll find another popular Levada hike, the Levada Nova Levada do Moinho. The entrance is a bit hidden and unmarked, but it's right beside the church. Parking is on the street. There's two ways to do this hike. The safe way out and back from the trailhead along Levada Moinho, and it's relatively flat but still very scenic. For a little adrenaline rush, instead of turning back, continue the loop and follow the signs for Levada Nova, just before the river crossing. You'll experience some overhead waterfalls and a tunnel which makes for fun photos. There are many exposed areas with sharp drop-offs, so just be careful. Not all of the sections had guardrails. And yet another reward at the end of the stop is the cafe in town for some great natas and coffee. There are restroom facilities here if you buy something, which is what you'll find at many of the trailheads versus public facilities.
So we just finished the hike, and I give it a 5 out of 5.
And I guess it's a 5. The first half was pretty easy. The second half is like, oh,
It's 2.
you're walking along like a 2-foot ledge, and it's pretty scary. There's no barriers in some parts.
You thought you were gonna fall off?
I thought I was gonna fall off.
Yeah, I'd do it again.
We started making our way toward Funchal, the capital city, for a second week. Just west of Funchal is Ponta do Sol, a very small seaside town with some nice architecture and a boardwalk area to view the massive ocean waves. The main reason why people stop at Ponta do Sol, though, is to visit the Waterfall of Angels, or rather drive through it and get your car washed as it cascades down a road. You can also park and walk to it like we did. If you're looking to try the local poncha, head to Taberna Poncha in the middle of the island. They have a large parking lot across the street, and the bar is a bit kitschy. Poncha is a local alcoholic drink unique to Madeira, and it's quite potent. It's made with lemon and orange juice and sometimes passion fruit, and of course, the main ingredient, sugarcane agricultural rum. Made from scratch here, you can munch on some peanuts while you sip away.
That's good.
Cabo Girao is a fun quick stop to experience one of the highest cliffs in the world. It rises to 580 meters and was said to be the point where João Gonçalves Zarcos, who discovered these islands, turned his ship around. They charge for admission to the glass observation deck, but it's only about €2 or so and worth a quick stop. There's a cable car a few kilometers east of here that takes you down to the beach at the bottom. The story behind the town of Pestano Churchill Bay becomes quite apparent as you see many signs referring to Sir Winston Churchill, who vacationed on these shores in 1950. It's a lively fishing village with cafes lining the waterfront and narrow walkways to explore. There's also a weekly market here, which we missed as it was closed for Easter. Madalana do Mar is the site of a fun hike if you want to get up close to the banana groves. It's a short hike, just over 2 kilometers, and well worth it. The blue bags covering the bananas protect the fruit as they ripen. And we learned that Madeira supplies these bananas only within Portugal, so you can't get them anywhere else. You can find them selling at the local grocery and fruit stores. Just look for the Made in Madeira sticker, and they're smaller than the varieties you find in North America. There's even a museum dedicated to the banana if you wanted to learn more. In the east end, at the Vereda do Larano, Boca de Risco hike, you can go as far or as short as you want, because there are so many side trails and it's popular with trail runners. It's actually the drive to get here where the last 2 kilometers is a single car track and the parking is tiny. It goes without saying, get here early. There are groups that get dropped off as well, so you'll avoid most of that too. We hiked just about 8 kilometers as an out and back route, turning around at the lookout. The trail has amazing views of the coast along most of the entire route. Many of the exposed areas had these flimsy looking guardrails to mentally help you cross safely. With such stunning scenery throughout, it makes the lookout destination relatively anticlimactic. It's a fairly safe, flat hike to this point, with only a short, very exposed section. A personal favorite hike of ours and a million others is the São Lourenço hike on the eastern tip of the island. Now if you want to avoid this, get here early, like before 8 a.m. We were here at 9 and got the last parking spot. The overflow parking off the side of the road can go on for over a kilometer away, and you don't want to hike up just to get to the trailhead. The crowd scatters a bit on the trail, but there are bottlenecks, especially if there's large groups of hikers. You don't have to go far to appreciate the beauty here. Every turn unveils more stunning scenery than the last. It's generally exposed and sunny on this end too. It was pouring rain when we left Funchal and nothing but blue skies on the trail. We called it the Dragon Tail hike, which is what it looks like from some viewpoints. We didn't see it from the plane when we landed here as the airport isn't far away, but have heard it's stunning to see it from above. There's a cafe and paid restroom when you get to the end point, just before you decide to summit the peak, or not. There are no facilities at the trailhead, so this is your only option. Definitely stop at the Miradoros on your way back to town for some great views. Yet another popular hike is the challenging Pico de Arriero to Pico Ruivo hike. It's known as a sunrise hike where you can see the sun rise above the layer of clouds as you stand on the highest point in Madeira. It's an out and back hike unless you do it one way and catch a taxi back to your car, but it's very expensive. About 70 euros is what we heard a taxi driver tell a hiker. There may be shuttles that you can book ahead as well. It gets extremely busy, and to avoid that, we chose to start at Pico Ruivo trailhead and just hike to that peak, which is marginally less crowded, and also the easier way to start if you want to be on a peak at sunrise. There are facilities just before you summit the peak and also back at the trailhead where there's a cafe with paid restrooms.
I lost the tip of my cheesecake.
The parking lot is large on this side and was almost empty at 7 a.m. when we started, but was overflowing when we left. We even saw a fight break out between two drivers. So get here as early as possible, otherwise it could be a hike to get to the trailhead. Probably the tackiest tourist destination is the town of Santana, where you can see the traditional Santana stone houses with thatched roofs that are just really little shops. This style of house was originally used by local farmers when the island was being settled. It's actually a nice little stop if you're in the area, but I wouldn't go here just for this. There's a hiking trail nearby, but we didn't make it there, so that would make it worthwhile. We weren't planning on visiting Porta da Cruz, but we saw a rum distillery on Google Maps, so we decided to follow it to this town. There's a beautiful turquoise beach across from the distillery. It's a bit rocky, but the water is relatively calm. If you continue past, it's a nice little walk along the water with a cool blowhole and a swimming pool that was closed, but I bet it's fun in the summer. The Casa do Rum is a fun visit. We thought it was just a store, but you can see how they make the famous Madeira rums the old-fashioned way. We had based ourselves in Funchal on our second week and would recommend that if it's your first time. With a population of 250,000, the city is situated along the southeast coast of the island, surrounded by steep hills. It's such a pretty, walkable town with narrow streets filled with shops and beautiful architecture. We stayed in an apartment super close to the main area so that we could walk out and explore different sections of town each day after our hikes. There are a few statues around Funchal, but this one is of Joao Gonzalez Zarco, who was one of the 2 sea captains that discovered the island of Madeira in 1419. There's an older part of town that has interesting painted doors, street art all along Rua de Santa Maria, along with tightly packed shops and restaurants. The famous Mercado is housed in a beautiful building with an open courtyard in the center. The vendors artfully display their fruit and vegetables. When the cruise ships are in, it gets jam-packed. It wasn't as great for shopping as I thought it would have been. We got here early to see the fish market section, but there was hardly anyone around. The fruit is somewhat overpriced, and you'll find better prices at the small corner shops. One of my favorite places in town is the tea house. We came here in the late afternoon and it was not busy, so we got their prime balcony table. It felt like we were in a Disney movie with the bakers working away in the top floor. There's a wide selection of teas on the menu, which you can also buy to take home. I'd recommend getting their own house blends that's unique to them.
We're at the tea house and we're gonna have some cake and tea.
You'll find natas everywhere, and we tried lots. Our favorite was the ones at Nata Sechi. If you time it right, you can get them piping hot, and you can get natas and a coffee for about €2. They have a couple locations in Funchal. High above Funchal is the Monte Palace Tropical Gardens. You can take the gondola lift from Old Town, but we drove here after one of our hikes. It's an interesting garden with exotic plants and landscaping. The property dates back to the 18th century and was a hotel at one point. It changed hands a few times until 1987, when it became a public garden for visitors and locals to enjoy today. The centerpiece is the palace itself, but you can only see it from outside as it's not open to visitors to go in. The traditional basket toboggan ride starts up here and takes you partway down, so you'll have to walk the rest of the way back to Funchal or take a taxi. These toboggans were used in the 19th century by residents to travel from Monte to the city center. It's a large estate, so we took our time exploring it all. The Asian garden section was heavily influenced by the last owner who traveled to Japan and China. The garden is designed to flow down to a central courtyard where you'll find a picturesque pond with its own swans and flamingos. We visited during the Easter weekend and found 2 of the giant Easter eggs hidden away. The prize was a book of the gardens. I gave one away to a little kid who didn't quite know what to make of it. We also made our way to the botanical gardens, as I love gardens. It's quite different than the Monte Palace, so I would say it's also worth a visit to both if you enjoy this. It was opened in 1960 and has over 200 exotic plants from all the continents, some of which are endangered. This is where you'll see the famous choreographed gardens that you see in many brochures. It's a peaceful, enjoyable walk, and there are great views of the city laid out before you. For more gardens and another view atop the city, just north of the cruise ship pier is a large public garden called Parque de Santa Catarina, where locals hang out. It's so peaceful here. For great gifts made in Madeira, check Fábrica Santo Antonio, which is a historical cookie shop dating back to 1893. Inside the shop, it retains its original shelves and layout. They gave us some free samples of their traditional biscuits. If you enjoy Madeira wines, there are many places to sample, but we chose to head to H.M. Borges for a great wine tasting. It's not free, but has some fine vintages to try. Like many other buildings, this one is steeped in history.
This was bottled in 2022, giving it 29 years. This is because Madeira wine, once it is bottled, does not age.
Well, port ages, right?
Port ages, not
Yeah,
Madeira.
but not
Madeira
Madeira
only
wine.
ages in the barrels. 29 years is the time that it was kept in the casks.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
We also spent some time exploring the Yellow Fort near Old Town, at least that's what Google called it. Not much to see, but there is a nice view and houses a fine dining restaurant where you can book a romantic dinner package complete with a classic car ride. And one of my favorite shops is the Queyaria da Avo cheese shop, which sells items from São Miguel. If you can't make it to the island, definitely stop here. The prices are very good. The tea was half the price of the same one from the tea shop. And the friendly owner will let you sample the cheese, which I highly recommend you get. Dave's favorite shop was the sardine shop with sardines from Portugal. So pretty. One thing to note about Madeira is that the weather can affect flights quite often. It can get very windy and foggy, and at least in the spring when we were here, and that means planes can't land safely. Europe has a very generous policy when it comes to cancellation, so while we had to reschedule our next flight to the Azores, we were put up in a really nice hotel in town near the airport. As for our final thoughts on Madeira, while you hear many describe it as the Hawaii of Europe because of the cliffs and the waterfalls, we think it's pretty unique on its own, and there's no place like it at all. You might almost say it's at a crossroads given how popular the island has become, where parts of the infrastructure are just overloaded, such as the hiking trails and the small towns where many of the Miradoros are located. We were here in low season and we had to get to the trailheads early to avoid the crowds and to find parking. At the Pico de Pico hike, the parking was closed to private cars temporarily to relieve the congestion the day after we hiked there. It's hard to imagine how it is during peak season. Madeira is a cafe culture, and you'll see cafes virtually everywhere and at almost every trailhead, so definitely slow down and take the time to enjoy a sip of an expertly pulled espresso and watch the world go by.
Mas quando eu olho nos olhos, é tudo bem diferente. A boca fala, mas o coração não mente.
As we say goodbye for an amazing time in Madeira, we're excited to be heading to the island of São Miguel, one of the islands in the Azores. I hope we get to say hello again in the future. There's still a lot we haven't seen yet, even after spending 2 weeks here.
Una vez nada más en mi ojo brilló la esperanza que alumbra el camino de mi soledad. Una vez nada más se entrega el alma con la dulce y total renunciación. Y cuando ese milagro realiza el prodigio de amarse, hay campanas de fiesta que cantan en el corazón.
Let us know if you have any questions or comments, and if you liked it, please consider subscribing and liking to help others find our channel. Canada has a large Portuguese-speaking population, and with the tourism boom, we get to enjoy direct flights from Canada with one of the local Portuguese airlines. A free stopover is included, so the flight costs cover our stop in the Azores as well. Any way you get here, it is definitely worth staying at least 2 weeks. There's so much to see and do. One thing we were not aware of was how much the weather can affect air travel, so be prepared for possible delays. We rented a car for the entire trip as we were doing a lot of hikes. Car rentals are on the pricey side for automatic transmission, about double the rate of manual cars. Keep checking the rates online as our car rental agency dropped prices a couple weeks before and honored the new rates for our booking. Full insurance is included, and if it isn't, I would definitely recommend you do. The roads are well maintained and we had a tiny car, which was fine. If you're not used to manual transmission, make sure to book an automatic car as they sell out quickly. The cost of joining a tour group is pricey, so a rental would be worth it for the additional flexibility that you get. The hikes are located all over the island, so if that's your game plan, consider splitting your time in the west and east ends of the island to make travel easier, as many are early morning hikes. In the west, we stayed in the hills above the town of Calheta. It's much cooler here in the winter-spring months, even with the small elevation change, but we liked it. Calheta was only 8 minutes away, and there was a small grocery and a lovely pizzeria within walking distance. For the east end, we stayed in the heart of Funchal, and it had its own parking garage, something you'll want if you have a rental car. I would even suggest staying further east of Funchal, as it was still a good 45 minutes to some of the popular eastern hikes from Funchal. Accommodations are still very affordable in Madeira, and both of the places we rented through Airbnb were locally owned and they welcomed us personally. At the small cafes, I would recommend paying in cash. Credit cards are widely accepted at most shops too. And the cost of groceries are also very affordable here. I bought some carrots and I think they charged me 5 cents for them. We didn't notice a lot of recycling facilities here, so try to avoid single-use plastics by bringing your refillable water bottles. We hope you enjoyed our video and that you make it to Madeira. Thanks for watching!